I'm going to talk about managing expectations, which is a big thing in sponsorship that we sometimes are not aware that we have. There's three groups of people in this. There are your personal expectations, there's the expectations of the refugee family, and there is the expectations of the sponsor group as a whole. And all of these are involved in making the sponsorship a success. We need to understand both ourselves and the family that we're sponsoring in order to make it successful. And we need to use skills to build a bridge if the expectations don't match. So first of all, I want to focus on expectations that we ourselves have. We often don't think about this, but what do you hope for in this sponsorship? I mean, what we hope for mostly often is what Tariq Haddad did with Peace for Chocolate. Very successful, excellent English, internationally known, but that rarely happens. So what is a good enough settlement? And what are you doing to get it? Good enough, maybe they can speak English in order to get a job. They have a good apartment. They are sort of established in Canada. That's really good enough. And if we get that, we should be happy enough with it. Maybe it's that their children have a good future. There is the trap of expecting gratitude because we're doing so much for them. We're donating money, we're donating our time, we're working for them, but you can't always get gratitude. So you should be aware that you can't always get what you want from the sponsorship. It's really about what the family needs and not what we need from it. Here are common sponsor expectations. And often they just don't happen. The newcomers may not want to be in Canada. They may be happy to be away from their war, the war in their country, but they don't really want to be here. What they want to be is back home in peace. Again, I talked about grateful because they don't necessarily have the energy to be grateful for you. The next one is we have gone to great lengths to be prepared. Everything will go according to plan. I read this out to my daughter and she couldn't stop laughing. It never goes according to plan. So I'm just saying that have a look at what your expectations are and be prepared to not have them met. The next group is the expectations of the sponsored family. They are often told by others things that don't necessarily happen. For example, they may have been told in a refugee camp that as one of our families was, that upon arrival to Canada, they will get $5,000 in cash. They will get a new apartment, they will get a car. This doesn't happen. And so when they don't get it, they may feel that they have been let down. And so you need to talk to them with a trusted interpreter and be aware of what they want. Also be aware of the power imbalance because you have the power and they don't. So they may feel that they need to act a certain way to please you. And not the way they really feel. There are a problem with short-term versus long-term goals. For example, when we sponsor families for a year, we want them to learn English. That we tell them that's the most important thing. They may feel that they need to get a job, that they need more money to send home. They also need to hold on to parts of their past. So you can't expect them to accept whatever we want for them because they need to be they need to hang on to what they can in order to feel better. Many refugees have lost themselves. They've lost their job, they've lost their home, they've lost their families. So they need to hang on to what they can have, what they can hold on to in order to maintain a sense of themselves. You can't ask them to move and change too quickly. the sponsorship group functions as a body in itself. People have different backgrounds, they have different expectations. In Canada, many people come from an individualistic society. Often refugees come from a collectivistic society, so they react differently. So you need to be aware that your expectations may not match with who they are. You also need to attend to the needs of the group, of the group as a whole, because you have to work together. In our group, even though we've been together for quite a while, a couple invited the family to a dinner, and they invited half of the group and didn't invite half of the other group, which causes friction among people who weren't invited. So you need to be careful to make the group function as a group. Also, don't compare yourself to other sponsoring groups, because everybody functions differently, everybody works differently. Integration, Usha George, who is a professor at TMU, gave a talk to our group recently, and she said one of the interesting things is that integration is a two-way process. As we change the refugee family, they change us, and both of us need to move together to do better. So very quickly, skills for navigating cultural differences. Number one is listening to understand. Often when we listen, we're just waiting until we can get our words in. So stop talking. I have something to say. What we should be doing is listening to understand the other person's point of view. For example, one of the people in the network was in a sponsor group with a former child soldier. And when he came, and all he could do was just lie in bed. He was so depressed. And the group didn't understand this. The group kept saying, why don't you get up and get a job? You're here, you're in Canada. We give you all these things. Why can't you get up? And he couldn't. And they could not hear what he was saying. You also need to accept where they are. We had one of our refugees refused to wear his bike helmet. And we had member after member talk to him and say, look, it's really important. If you fall, you may get a brain injury. You have your family to take care of. You must wear the bike helmet. And he refused to. So in the end, we just had to accept that he wasn't going to. Nothing was going to change him. And this also is an example of compromise. So that you have to be able to compromise with the refugee family because it empowers them when you listen to them. And finally, modeling. You can model the behavior that you want. They won't not necessarily do it, but you can try. But be careful not to do this with the children, because especially for girl children in some cultures, they don't want the independence that we have in Canada, and they will see it as a rejection or as an insult to them. Danny Ramadan, who is a Syrian refugee, wrote a book that came out recently, and he talked about microaggressions from sponsors when they expected him to behave the way they wanted him to behave. And it struck me that the aggression is a very powerful word, but that's how he saw it. The expectation of his sponsors for him to behave in a certain way. So you should be careful about that. There are always speed bumps in the way. And these factors that can affect a culturalization. Their cultural beliefs, which are often very different from ours. As I said, many of them are in a collectivist society where we're in an individualistic one. Limited education. People with limited education have more difficulty, not only learning English, but also learning the way of the new country. Trauma, the traumas that they have in the past. Often when you have had trauma, you need to hold on to what you have. And also don't expect them to talk about their trauma. Because while we are taught that it's a good thing to talk about trauma, in essence, research has shown that it isn't necessarily a good thing. If you can compartmentalize it and leave it behind, then that may be actually better for you. And finally, as I said, our expectations are what is good for them. If we push too hard, then it actually makes it more difficult for them. So here are a couple of good websites. The Refugee Sponsored Training Program has a lot of good information about many things from month 13, even to a thing on managing expectations. And the Aura Sponsorship Handbook is absolutely wonderful, and thank you to Aura for doing it. And we all want the same thing, which is to have a good sponsorship and happy Canadian citizens. Thank you.